Hey folks, welcome back. Today we're talking a little bit of short game, and specifically there's something that I see players do that they think that if they do this, it almost guarantees that they're going to make perfect contact. But when I give short game lessons, the amount of times that players show up doing this thing and make good contact is very, very, very rare. So I don't know if we want to call it, we're going to debunk a myth, but the thing that we're going to talk about today is the misconception around presetting a lot of weight on our lead leg. And what I mean by that is players that come into a short game shot, and right now, this is even kind of before we talk about ball position. I think that's a whole nother story because I've seen it in a bunch of different ways. But players that come in and think that, okay, all I have to do is put 80% of my weight or get everything on my front leg. And if I just hit a short game shot from here, that's going to guarantee that I make good contact. So what I want to dive into today is the two things that I see that go usually so wrong with that, but then also one or two concepts to talk about how we actually train to do what we see the best players in the world do, or oftentimes what we see the best players in the world do. So let's dive into it. So misconception number one, or confusion point number one, is a lot of people think that if they just preset a lot of weight on their lead leg and quote unquote keep it there, that they're not going to move. From a static position, that might be the case. But as soon as we start to take a backswing, the thing that I believe that they forget is the arms and the club weigh something. And when we start to move anything, when we start to create momentum in any direction, there's a good chance that the center of pressure and also our center of mass is going to move. So what happens for a lot of players is they think, okay, I'm going to set it and forget it. But then the second they make a backstroke, what's happened is they start to move off that golf ball. They start to move back a little bit. And now they're going to make a downswing thinking, well, I don't have to do anything with my lower body. And usually that will cause low point control issues because they think, okay, I'm going to preset on my front leg. I'm going to stay there. But now I make a backswing. And even if it's only 1 or 2 inches, if we move 1 or 2 inches back when we're thinking we're not moving at all, that's going to be a big contact issue or a big contact problem for us. The other thing that happens now when we think about the downstroke, especially if we don't have a right understanding of the correct short game sequence, is I'll see players that get set up in this scenario, and let's assume they did the first part right, that somehow they have not moved forward. What ends up happening now is they usually lead with their lower body, or they end up leading with their knees. And I see like this divey knee move a lot. And this buckling of the knees will still cause very similar contact problems. So the way to think about it, the lower body is active in these shots no matter what, right? It's holding us up. It's the only thing keeping us connected to the ground. But if we think that, okay, I'm just going to plant myself there and I'm not going to move, what we see happen oftentimes is that in the backstroke, we see ourselves move off the golf ball, whether we know it or whether we believe it or not. And then in the downstroke, what happens is we end up sequencing incorrectly, and the lower body leads from this position, and then we end up seeing those diving knees, and then all the things that happen from there. So I believe for most of you, let's do away with this thought that we're just going to keep the lower body still. Let's instead talk about how we want to use the lower body in these short game shots. And when we watch a lot of the best short game players in the world, if I had to pick out one main difference, I know there's a lot of them, but if I had to pick out one main difference between what I think a lot of good short game players do and what a lot of bad short game players do, in the backstroke, the good players are actually moving into their lead side. They're creating that momentum. They're actually moving towards the target. And what I mean by that right now is as they make a backstroke, they're actually moving slightly into their lead side. Sometimes we'll see it visually with their center of mass. Oftentimes on something like force plates, we'll see it with their center of pressure. But a lot of really good short game players have this tendency that in the backstroke, they're actually moving pressure into their lead side. Because then what that allows us to do in the downswing is the second part of what most really good short game players do and most amateurs don't do. And that's that thought of extending, like kind of getting up so the arms can release through the short game shot. And again, I know that there's a lot of thoughts about forward shaftling, no forward shaftling, but again, the consistencies and the way the body moves in good players is almost regardless of which technique that you have. So what we want to see happen is as we make that backstroke, we're actually moving pressure into our lead side. And then as we start the downswing, it's not the knees going this way, it's the legs actually starting to straighten a little bit, and we can start to extend so we can start to release the golf club and make good contact. But one has to set up the other. If we don't get pressure into that lead side in the backstroke, we're usually cooked anyways. There are some players that can do it in the downswing, but usually I don't see it a lot in amateur players. So oftentimes what I talk about is the thought of I like to set up very neutral in my setup. We're going to press. We're really going to think of that lead leg and get some pressure into that lead side in the backswing so that in the downswing we can start to extend and we can allow the club to release and come through and hit this shot. For those of you that chunk a lot of shots, one of the reasons why, we go back to that first problem where you preset, you think, okay, I'm just going to keep all my weight here, your knees are bent, and then what happens is you just keep your knees there and you never actually extend, and we're going to bottom out way behind the golf ball, so then that's sometimes you start to become the player that tries to hang back. So I don't want you to be the player that sets up with the weight way back in your or try to preset all that weight forward and try to keep it there. Even these short game shots is way more dynamic than that. Very rarely can we take anything out of the golf swing. Don't move the arms, don't move the hands, don't move the legs. There's always something moving. So let's instead change this thought. We're going to start neutral. As soon as the club starts to move, we're actually going to press into our lead leg. And then actually when we think of this golf shot now in the downswing, we're going to allow ourselves to extend and release that golf club coming through. For some of you, that might be an interesting concept, but if you're showing up here right now struggling with chunks and skulls and those different things, your short game needs an intervention. And oftentimes this is a place that I go with a lot of golfers. If we want a drill to think about, it's something that we see players use in the full swing a lot. We're going to talk about in the short game is actually a little bit of a step drill where we're going to set up with our feet together. And the thing I'll caution, we're not making a big step here because we're not making a big golf swing. But we're going to go ahead and set up with our feet together. And as soon as that club starts to move, we're just going to take a baby step and then we're going to come through to a finish. And the thing that I'll make sure that I say when we do this, let's make sure when we take that step that you don't just move the foot, but then keep all your mass on your trail leg. We're going to think we want everything to kind of move over as we take this little step. And it's just a very simple way for us to rehearse. As soon as the club starts to move, this is us actually getting pressure into our lead side. And that motion of stepping will allow us to extend and release as we hit these golf shots. A very simple drill that for many players is very effective. So to summarize what we've talked about today, I believe for most of you, if you're struggling with the short game, quit trying to think that you're going to preset all your weight on your left side. The golf swing is very dynamic. Let's not try to force things to not move because they're always going to move. And when we look at a lot of really good short game players, the things that they have is they're actually moving pressure into their lead side in the backswing. And then yes, that's actually allowing them to extend a little bit and release that golf club coming through. If you have any questions, please post them down below. If you're struggling with your short game, consider some of the things I talked about and let me know down below if they've been helpful for you. Thanks again for watching, folks, and have a great day.